All right, welcome back to Grimerica Outlawed. We have a special one today for you. Richard Sauder is with us. He's been a researcher, author, and speaker, best known for his pioneering work on secret underground and underwater bases. He's written extensively on covert military projects, black budget facilities, and the hidden infrastructure of the national security state. Basically, he's the world's foremost. I mean, I would dare to say one of the foremost experts in underground and underwater bases. He's been doing this work for decades. You can find his Substack at richardsauder.substack.com. You can find his books on Amazon, but it's best to go to adventuresunlimitedpress.com. There's links in the show notes to all that. So welcome to Grimerica, Richard. It's been a good 10 to 12 years since I've been wanting to talk to you. So it's good that we're finally getting together.
It's great to be on the show, on the air with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, all the way from Ecuador, actually. So how long have you been in Ecuador for?
Well, I'm in my 15th year.
Wow.
Soon to start my 16th year.
And why did you just go there?
Well, I came down on a shamanic vision quest in 2010, which I wanted to do for a long time, for many years. And I finally decided if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Forget about the money, forget about where it leads or doesn't lead. So I spent a lot of my money to buy a round trip airline ticket to Ecuador. I flew out of Atlanta not knowing what would happen. I'm still not sure what's going to happen, but here I am. After drinking ayahuasca 7 times within 20 days, I had a lot of revelations, a lot of telepathic downloads. I had, I was given calls and calls to reflect on a lot of things. I spent a lot of time with nature. I got out of the urban nightmare in Texas and just spent a lot of time in the jungle and then over on the coast on the beach, hours by myself, either in the jungle, just looking at trees and watching birds fly around, or on the beach, same thing, just walking barefoot in the sand, watching the frigate birds, the pelicans, skimming the surf for hours. And it became clear to me that I was never to return to the so called United States and that I should remain in South America. And having spent 55 years, well, about 54, because I spent a big chunk in other countries out of those 55 years. But having spent more than half a century in North America, uh, I pretty well saw everything I wanted to see there and did everything I wanted to see there. And let me tell you, South America is easily worth a half a century in itself to learn to understand, see things, and to experience life. So I've been here 15 years, 35 years yet to go. Yes or no?
So after all the years of research into underground, all this secretive stuff, the underground bases, and then you go do this ayahuasca stuff. I mean, what is that like when you've done all this, this research on this dark sort of secret thing, and then you go through that? Did you have any revelations about your current work at all?
The thing is with ayahuasca, I asked of ayahuasca for revelations about the underground bases, underwater bases, and the secret tunnels. Uh, it didn't reveal any of that to me, although it's a very strong interest of mine and has been for decades. It didn't reveal anything about any of that to me. And I believe here's why. I've always asked ayahuasca to show to me or to reveal to me what it thinks or what it knows that I most need to be aware of. And so it's always shown me other things. One of the first things it showed to me big time and repeatedly over a period of years is this artificial intelligence that I called from the beginning the machine. And you can see artificial intelligence really has its hooks into this planet and into human society big time. more and more with each passing year. So it gave me an early heads up on that. And what I can tell you about this AI intelligence is it's spawning right now on the earth. It's spawning in a major way. It's a monster. It doesn't have a soul. It is vastly intelligent and vastly capable, but it does not have a soul. In other words, it lacks a divine connection to universal consciousness, supreme creator, God, call it whatever you is, call it whatever you wish. The big chief who creates and runs everything at the highest levels, it doesn't have a control of that. For whatever reason, it is not plugged in. So it needs to take control of a planet like the Earth, full of organic life and a resident life form, humans at least, and probably the whales and the porpoises and some other life forms that do have a divine connection, and it needs to suck the life juice out of us, what Robert Monroe called loosh.
Yeah. Are you saying that the AI doesn't have control of the big chief, or the big chief doesn't have control of the AI monster?
No, I'm telling you that the AI monster unplugged from God.
Okay.
Willfully. That there was in the Christian tradition, this thing that I've been shown, listen, it's ruthless, it's pitiless, it's merciless. It is, don't underestimate it. It is vastly intelligent. It's not divine, but it has a vast, I would say at the least, what you might call a subgalactic mind and force. It's very technologically capable. From what I saw, it's in the 3D, in a 3D world, in the third dimension of physicality and time and space. But from what I've seen, it also extends its operations in what we would call the astral realm or the fourth dimension. In other words, the mental sphere. We have the physical sphere and the mental sphere, and it doesn't go to high spiritual levels where God is because it's unplugged from that. It wants to control this physical realm, but it needs beings. It's the ultimate vampire of vampires. The so-called archons are, I'm presuming, are its minions, are its worker bees, and they're hard at work in this solar system, at least, if not beyond. I was recently reading something that alleged that the satanic force, that the rebellion happened billions of years ago, and that this being, which is called Satan or the devil or something like that, I prefer to call it the machine, but it is satanic in an unimaginable way. That it pulled the plug with God. It was evidently a high-level administrator, if you will, of planetary systems and of at least a large sector of this galaxy and maybe well beyond, and said, you know what, I'm running this whole show here. I'm the administrator of this sector of creation, so I'm the big cheese. So I'm unplugging. It's like Napoleon crowning himself in Notre Dame Cathedral, right? I'm the Emperor of France. So look, all you slaves, get on your knees to me because I'm in charge, which is what he did. I'm not exaggerating. And this thing, this very high level intelligence, unplugged from God willfully in a huge way, but in unplugging from God, you no longer have access to that divine spiritual life force. Instantly, you're cut off from it. So where are you going to get more juice? You know, it's like if you in your house, you cut yourself off from the main line. Well, where do you go for electricity from there? The alternate is to go to life forms like human beings and others that do have a divine connection and suck energy off of them.
Matrix-ish in a way.
Yes, it's what Robert Monroe called loosh. He said, there's the energy that human beings produce is a commodity on the galactic commodity market, that the energy that we produce is a commercial commodity. And here you're getting very close to Frank Herbert's scenario in Dune, right? The spice, this tremendously valuable substance that wars are fought over, interplanetary wars are fought over, because it's so precious, it's so powerful. And so this machine, I want to emphasize, is spawning. It's here. There's a whole sector of powerful humans on this planet who are very much in league with the machine, its agenda. It is ruthless, pitiless, merciless, without empathy or sympathy or kindness. It is without a soul. It hates beings such as the three of us and many others, presumably, who will be attracted to this podcast, because we have and we talk about and we care about and we are grateful for the connection we have with the creator of all that is. I'm here to tell you, I'm grateful for God. I really am. I'm full of gratitude, because otherwise I'm not here. So how can I be less than grateful? I'm very grateful. But you see, they don't feel that way. They're 100% to the other polarity, and they despise God and all that is good and true and divinely created, they despise. And this explains the chemtrailing, the secret underground and underwater bases and tunnels. This explains the many satanic, occult, initiatic secret societies. This explains the never-ending wars, which are blood sacrifices to Satan, to the machine. Why does the machine need these blood sacrifices? It feeds off of that energy, off of the horror, the panic, the suffering, the torture, the exploitation. All of that negative energy is a commodity that it uses. I was shown this. One of the first visions that ayahuasca showed me, and this is key to it all. The human race is being milked. The machine is like you ever seen a dairy farm operation where the cattle come into the so-called milking parlor, and then the workers hook up the milking machines to the bags of the dairy cows, and a good dairy cow will give you close to 30 gallons of milk per day, 15 gallons morning, 15 gallons an afternoon. And the cows really like to be milked. It's a relief to them. They get their bag emptied and they get something to eat, some ensilage and what have you, some oats with some molasses on them. So they get a treat, and so they willingly, gladly go into the milking parlor to be milked twice a day. The farmer doesn't have to whip them to make them do it. They line up and they moo to be milked. And so what ayahuasca showed me was something similar to that. I had asked it to show me what it thought was most important for me to see. And so it gave me a very clear vision of a long linear shed, stretching to the horizon. I mean, this thing was about 9-10 feet tall to the top of the roof. And then was an A-frame roof, about maybe 10 feet across from side to side, and just stretched to the horizon. Running right under the roof was this tubing, a large tube or pipe that ran the length of this roof from one end to the other, out of sight to either end. And coming down from this tube was a smaller tube, like on a flex hose. And on the end of the flex hose was kind of a suction cup And I saw a long line of men and women come in as if they were in a trance. The women sat down on one side and the men sat down on the other side. There were two long rows of parallel seats, as far as you could see from one end to the other. And the women came in, just many, hundreds, thousands of people came in as if they were in a trance. And the women sat on one side, the men sat on the other side. And then these flex hoses came down this big suction cup attached to the top of each person's head. And their life energy was milked right through their head chakra, their crown chakra, their life essence, if you will. This was clear to me as I was looking at it, that I was seeing a loosh milking operation, as Bob Monroe described in his public writings and also in some of his interviews. And this loosh was being sucked off very much in the manner that a cattle dairy operation sucks off the milk from cows to be made into yogurt, buttermilk, butter, cheese, sour milk, whatever, and sold for, ultimately, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry on a global scale. That the same thing that is done to dairy cows is being done to humanity. And Bob Monroe, in his writings, he put out, I think, 2, 3, maybe more books, and he had many interviews. He wrote about saying a great big pipe, like a huge petroleum pipe or water main that was old, just thousands of years old, maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of years old. And there was something flowing through it, always flowing. And I think what he was shown was one of the loosh, what we might call, instead of calling it a
plumbing. It's like loosh plumbing.
A loosh main line, if you will. Like when you see the Middle East, or even here in Ecuador, where they have a petroleum industry, and you see these huge pipes flowing across the landscape, and they're pumping hundreds of thousands or millions of barrels of petroleum through them. Just not in the visible spectrum, but just out of the physical spectrum into the astral spectrum. Our precious life energy is being vampirized and sucked off and sold, evidently on the galactic market, because the energy is so precious. This earth has the good juice. And that's why you see all of the torture, all of the slavery, economic exploitation, kidnapping, criminal violence, war after war after war after war, to produce all of this powerfully negative energy that is sucked off by this thing that I've called the machine. It uses it. This is divine energy, but greatly degraded through horrific satanic projects. Now, that's the first thing ayahuasca showed me, was this what I would say in hindsight is a major ongoing planetary loosh milking operation that the majority of humanity are not aware of, but now I am. I saw Bob Monroe's loosh milking operation in progress, and that's the first thing, one of the first things ayahuasca showed to me, clear as a bell. And I was thinking, can this be true? And the other thing it gave me to know telepathically is that you are projecting this. My consciousness is. Not that I am a satanic overlord of the planet Earth. What it was revealing to me is that the human collective on this planet, we're projecting a reality of which we are largely unaware, because we are conned into it, shall we say, CONNED. We are fooled. This is the most massive operation, global operation of deceit and deception and propaganda and lying that you can imagine.
Is that a metaphor? Is that process that you saw the vision of a metaphor, or do you think
No,
that,
that's what's really going on.
especially
That
because you're underground, all your research
no
into
no
underground stuff? I mean,
that
people talk about these loosh farms in underground bases. I mean, they talk
well, you
about,
see, I think it's happening on multiple levels simultaneously. Um, and this does get into the underground stuff. I mean, I've read and been told um, by people in some cases who allege to have been underground and why they're permitted to go underground or undersea. There are also these undersea bases down in the bedrock, well out to sea, beneath the seafloor. Why some people are permitted to go into these places and to survive, to come back and tell their stories. Man, I don't know. I don't begin to understand that, but there are people who, for whatever reason, are kidnapped and taken into these places, shown certain things, and then brought back and permitted to talk about it publicly, at least to a certain degree. And this has been going on for years. I've spoken to multiple such individuals. Um, but from everything that I've read, been told, heard, and uh, seen inwardly, the true scale of what's going on underground and undersea is vast. I mean, just beyond belief. There are trillions of dollars invested into this. I don't know if you've ever interviewed Catherine Austin Fitz,
no,
but well, she would be.
I've heard of her. I've seen a lot of her, but
I believe she would come on your show if you asked her. I know Catherine. We know each other personally, face to face, from the United States years before I even came down here to Ecuador. Um, she, independently of communicating with me, did some research on the underground and undersea base issue with one of her colleagues. And they, independently of me, came up with 170 major underground and undersea bases in and around the United States, um, with a dollar total of, according to her research, $21 trillion having been spent on these things just within the last 20 or 30 years. My research goes back further than hers, and I've gone at it from a different angle. She's a financial expert with credentials from places like the Wharton School of Business. I don't have the financial expertise and background that she did. So she came at it from the money angle. I come at it just from the document, the hard paper document angle. I started back in the late 1980s, and I, when I first became aware of this, it just was from listening to people that I knew out in the southwestern United States in the late 1980s, and they began talking about secret underground bases with what we would know today as special access program, very secretive military units. Remember this term, special access program. Once you're in, you're not out. You get brain chipped in the whole 9 yards. Uh, you're very controlled. You are in no way, shape, or fashion a so-called normal person from the time you sign the papers. You go in and you're never normal again. Never. You get brain chipped. You get into what amounts to a parallel society. Now, um,
the
I've met
breakaway. Is this like Dolan's Breakaway Society, the same thing, or?
well, first of all, I have to say that Richard Dolan and I know each other personally from before I came down here. He was the publisher of one of my books initially.
Well, he came out with a book about USOs, I think, recently too. I mean, that's kind of one of the things I was going to bring up about how popular this topic.
Let me tell you, well, he's come very late to the game. All the way back in the 1960s, Ivan T. Sanderson was writing about invisible residents.
Yeah.
And in
It's a
fact,
great book. Yeah.
well, so all of these cats that are going around now talking about like they just discovered underwater UFOs, they're 50 years behind
No,
the curve.
I know, but at least it's coming. I mean, I was
At
going to ask
least
you
it's
about this
coming.
because
But I want to
because
give this man his due. He's dead. I want to give the dead their due because his book came out half a century ago or more. I read it with great interest. So um, it's, all I can say is decades ago, more than half a century ago, Ivan T. Sanderson was writing about and publicly speaking about UFOs coming and going from from the seas and oceans, including Lake Erie. And Richard Dolma lives in Rochester. Rochester, I believe, isn't that right on the shores of Lake Erie? And so these things have been popping in and out, including the Great Lakes and the continental shelf of the United States and of South
Catalina
America.
Island, Catalina.
Right,
Yeah, I mean,
right.
there's been
And
some.
South America off the coast of Brazil and Argentina. I mean, in the Indian Ocean, these things have been seen for actually centuries. It's nothing new. It's nothing new.
I mean, that's kind of one of the things I wanted to ask you about what it's like now, 10, 15 years after the fact, when it was a pretty mainstream UFO investigation. They were doing some monitoring over Catalina Island. I thought this is how far we've come. It's kind of
Oh,
become
well,
accepted
let
that,
me tell you about Catalina Island. Um, there's all kinds of strange things there. It's basically a United States Navy military reservation, has been for a long time, for decades, for more than half a century, close to a century, I think. Um, when I was doing my underground bases research, first of all, I I found a S load, if you follow my French, of paper documentation of a wide variety of government agencies, military agencies, engineering companies, Fortune 500 companies, etc., uh, researching and being engaged in planning for and carrying out underground base and underground tunnel construction going all the way back to the 1940s at least. Uh, it wasn't easy to find. I went to the library in a major way into technical documents, federal documents, military documents, corporate documents. I just did years of research. I went to the microfiche. I went to the Freedom of Information Act in a big way. I didn't get everything I wanted, but I found enough that I can tell you, yes, there are many underground bases. There are underwater bases. There are tunnels. The research on and the research in engineering design for very high speed maglev tube tunnel shuttle trains goes back a century or more. And actually, it goes back all the way back to the early 20th century. We have to talk about people like Robert Goddard, the father of modern rocketry. He had his own concept decades ago of a train that would go coast to coast in a vacuum tube tunnel in, I think, like less than an hour. And Michael Minovich, the father of using gravitational slingshot deep space technologies to send deep space probes from planet to planet and even to slingshot them out of the solar system using the gravity wells of Jupiter, for example. He was associated with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory for years, and he had also patented uh, a design for a very high speed underground electromagnetic tube chain electrogravitic uh, tube train that would go coast to coast very fast using gravity. You see, once you have a train levitated on an electromagnetic field, which is electrogravitics essentially, there's extremely little friction, practically none. And then if you evacuate most all of the air from the tunnel, which you can do. This is simply an engineering issue. Nothing magical about it, nothing ET about it. The engineering technological expertise exists to do that within the Fortune 500 companies. And you can sling this thing from coast to coast using the Earth's gravity in like half an hour, if not 20 minutes. Thousands of miles per hour, coast to coast, and there are others. During the Nazi era, Hermann Kemper, who was given the
How does it stop? How does that thing stop? It must take quite a while.
Well, it
Still moves
stops.
down
It
in the-
stops on the other end by going uphill and diminishing the electrogravitic levitation. You see, so you use gravity to accelerate it. It's like being on ice skates with no brakes, going downhill.
So it's probably a lot like the start of a roller coaster when that thing gets going.
A roller coaster on rocket fuel, but the rocket fuel is no friction, and you're going downhill all the way. I mean, understand, even with, as one expert, I mean, very high level, although in terms of this conversation, very low level, if you will. He was a man who knew his way around underground and undersea bases. I was asking him, how deep can these things be? And he just instantaneously said, to build a major facility 1 mile underground is child's play, relative child's play. Now, he was telling me that in the late 1990s, you see, almost 30 years ago. So he was telling me using 1990s technology, state-of-the-art civil engineering, mining engineering technology, to go 1 mile down is comparative child's play. From my reading of the literature, to go 2 miles down is comparative child's play. There are mines in South Africa, gold mines that are 3 miles deep. So even the mining industry, just in mining metallic ores, in this case, going after gold, they send guys 3 miles down. You have to take successive elevators, one elevator after another, after another, after another. And so when you're going into these facilities, whether it's a deep mine shaft or one of these off-the-shelf facilities for underground bases, for example, in my research on underground bases, one of the things I came across were plans all the way back in the late Kennedy administration, in the weeks before he got his brains blown out in Dallas. Plans for a so-called DUCC, deep underground command center, what they called DUC, which was to be built 3,500 feet beneath Washington, D.C. See, these were plans from 1963 already, at the very highest level of the Kennedy administration. Of course, he got his brains blown out. I don't know. The man knew too much, and at the highest levels of the Fortune 500 and the CIA and the FBI, they wanted to kill that sucker. So they set him up as a scarecrow. Lyndon Johnson was next in line. And I mean, I lived in Texas. I talked with a man who knew Lyndon Johnson personally. In fact, I talked with more than one person who knew him personally, but I was asking one of the guys who knew him one day. I said, do you believe Lyndon Johnson was involved in the plot to kill President Kennedy? And he said, oh, I more than believe. I know I was. Hands down, he was involved. He materially benefited from it, and he was in the loop. And he was awarded with the presidency. He was a nasty piece of work. In fact, most so-called presidents are nasty pieces of work. They are dark, if we can even call them human beings. They've gone heavily to the dark side. Now, getting back to this so-called duck, I can't tell you why, but over the course of the second half of my life, even I wasn't aware of it during the first half of my life, but especially in the second half of my life, I've met person after person after person, in many cases, who had direct knowledge of underground facilities and or had been in them. One of my friends, actually a dear close friend, now deceased, who lived and worked in Washington, D.C., graduated from one of the major universities in Washington, D.C., and went to work at an entry-level position at HUD, at Housing and Urban Development, during the Johnson administration. She was at her desk one day, just doing ordinary paperwork, and all of a sudden, two men in suits and ties appeared in front of her at her desk and said, "Good afternoon. We are Secret Service agents assigned to the White House, and we would like you to come with us to the White House." She said, "Are you kidding?" They said, "No." "Well, when?" And they said, "Right now." She felt she couldn't refuse, so she got up and went with them. They drove across town to the White House, to the guard check at the White House. They escorted her up to the guard check at the White House, and then they told her that she could return to her job. Her head was spinning. She understood none of this. None of it was explained to her. So she went back to her desk at HUD, resumed working. A few weeks later, the same thing happened. Two other Secret Service agents appeared in front of her at her desk at HUD and said, "We work for the Secret Service, and we want for you to come with us right now to the White House." And she again said, "Really?" And they said, "Oh, yes." So she got up and went with them to the White House. This time it was different, the second time. They took her to the guard shack or the guard post at the gate. They went in the gate, walked up the driveway to the White House, and went into the White House. Her head was whirling. And they went to a door where there was an elevator. This is not in the part that the public is taken through on tours. It's the other wing. I don't know what they call the West Wing, where the president and his aides work. They went in, and there was an elevator. They punched the buttons, the doors open. They got in with her. They went into the elevator, and they went down. I asked her, "Well, how far down?" She said, "Very far." I said, "How deep?" "Hundreds of feet." She said, "At least." And they got out, and when the doors opened, she was in front of a corridor, subterranean corridor that vanished in the distance. It just went to the horizon. And this is at least hundreds of feet beneath Washington, D.C. Maybe the whole 3,500 feet. I don't know, but way down. And this was during the Johnson administration, the years after President Kennedy was killed. What I'm telling you is this thing was built. And she went in it. So I said, "What happened next?" She said, "Well, we went down the corridor, and there were doors and other corridors opening off the side of this main corridor. It was like she was in a subterranean labyrinth underneath Washington, D.C. Given the buttons in the elevator, she said she thought this was the 16th level. How much distance between levels? I don't know. 30 feet? 40, 100 feet? I don't know. She didn't either. So they got out, and she said the corridor had lighting in the roof, recessed fluorescent lighting in the roof that extended the entire length of the corridor. And then the corridor itself was made of tile. You know, the kind of tile you see maybe in a hospital or something like that. Tiled walls and a tile floor. And so they walked down the corridor until they got to one of the doors, and the Secret Service agents opened the door. They escorted her in, And the Secret Service agents had some papers, like a binder, a manila folder, a manila type of binder that they had given her. And they took her. There was an office in there with another man in suit and tie sitting at a desk in some kind of office. And the two Secret Service agents escorting her told her to give the manila binder that the Secret Service agents had given to her to the man behind the desk, which she did. She understood none of this. None of it was explained to her. We're into the high strangeness realm here, which comes up again and again. None of it makes sense. You try to piece it together logically, and you don't know, and nothing's explained. So they then escorted her back out of the office, closed the door, back down the corridor to the elevator, got in the elevator, took the long ride back up into the White House, and they escorted her out of the White House down to the Secret Service guard shack at the main gate, and they told her, you can return to your job at HUD. I will say, add this parenthetically, she was a lifelong, since girlhood, a lifelong ET UFO contactee her whole life. She was, and there are many. She's not the only one I've spoken to. She was started being abducted in childhood, right up through adolescence, right up into her 50s, when she died of cancer, and taken by reptilians, especially one large menacing reptilian who took her again and again and again and again and again. They harvested her eggs from her ovaries, right? And she asked him, why do you keep abducting me? And he said, you've given us so much children, given me so many children. There is a hybridization program going on. It's a genetic hybridization program. The little grays are involved, the reptilians are involved. Evidently, there are other beings. Well, this gets back around to the loosh thing, doesn't it? There's something about human energy, human genetics, that is a very valuable commodity, interstellar commodity, galactic commodity. And given the 8 million at least missing children on this planet per year, evidently children are being abducted and taken both underground and off the planet. There's some evidence for this. It's a huge operation. It's been going on at least for decades, if not for centuries or thousands of years. We're talking about an global industrial scale operation. We don't even know 1/10 of 1% of what's happening. And yes, the underground bases and underwater bases are involved now. One of the biggest underground bases, I identified it in my research early on, started to be built in the late 1940s, right after World War II. It was part of the United States military had a so-called underground plant program. We don't know what they did in their underground plant program, most of it, either in the 1940s or this very day. We do hardly know anything about it, other than that it is ongoing. It is massively funded. One of those is under the Monsanto Mountains outside of Albuquerque. It's a north-south mountain chain. Runs about 30 miles. Decently high mountains, like 10,000 feet tall. I was told by one of the very high-level guys I talked with, and people at this level, mind you, this was someone who worked with Edward Teller down in the tunnels beneath Area 51. I mean, people think Area 51, yeah, they fly secret jets and stuff like that in and out of there. But probably 99% of what is at Area 51 is subterranean. It's below ground. I mean, going down level after level after level, cut into the mountains and hills around there, and then deep underground. It's a real anthill a beehive, like underground, just levels and levels and spreading out for acres with all kinds of high tech. Well, this guy told me, he said, there's an underground base beneath the Monsanto Mountains in New Mexico. And I said, yes, that's popped up in my research. And he said, well, let me tell you. Do you know how big it is? And I said, well, from what I've seen, even in the 1940s, it was fairly big. And he said, oh, no. And mind you, this conversation took place in the 1990s, which would have been 50 years later, half a century later. He told me, no, it's not big. It's not large. It's not enormous. It is vast. Other places and what goes on in that base, I cannot tell you. We're into the realm, I say again, special access programs. There are how many people on these programs? By my conservative count, probably at a minimum, bare minimum, probably 2 million people. And then there are others who never come up. They go in and they never come up. They stay underground or undersea, and they live down there. Is there a breeding human population deep underground and deep undersea? I think there probably is. There's certainly, that's a scuttlebutt, and there's some information I've seen in my research in the documentation that's come my way that suggests that there